The sky above Greystone Shores was a pale sheet of cloud, not quite gray, not quite white, like the day itself was holding its breath. A jet-black town car slowed along the long, pebbled driveway of the Whitmore estate, its tires crunching softly like whispers on marble. Inside, a woman sat perfectly still, back straight, jaw relaxed, eyes sharp. Zora Whitfield, CEO of EtherCore, had made her way into boardrooms far colder than this June afternoon, but today wasn't business as usual. Today, she was invited. Technically, the estate rose before her like a Greek temple, designed by someone who wanted legacy carved into every corner. Polished stone, cut glass, flags in the breeze that didn't move. She'd been summoned here to finalize a merger worth $500 million, the kind of deal people would kill to shake hands on. But sometimes, the most dangerous rooms aren't the ones that reject you. They're the ones that welcome you in just far enough to remind you you're still not one of them. Before she stepped out of the car, she adjusted the gold cuff on her wrist, a gift to herself when EtherCore crossed its first billion in valuation. Not flashy, just enough to remind her she built this. If you're someone who's ever walked into a room and felt the air shift because of who you are, if you've ever smiled through clenched teeth while someone laughed at your expense, or if you've ever been invited to the table, only to find out the seat was meant to be silent, then this story is for you. Before we begin, do one quiet act of power. Like this video. Subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded they don't have to shrink to fit. Now, let me take you back to the moment Zora stepped through those glass doors, heels clicking like punctuation on polished stone, not knowing yet that by the time this weekend ended, she wouldn't just walk out of that house, she'd walk away from $500 million, and the world would hear her silence louder than any speech. The moment Zora Whitfield stepped through the arched glass doors of the Whitmore estate, she felt it, that soft, calculated hush, the kind that happens not because the music stops, but because the wrong person just walked in. She wasn't dressed to provoke. A black silk blouse, structured cream blazer, and slacks tailored in quiet confidence. Her heels weren't high, but they echoed. And her presence, it didn't ask for permission. The room was flooded with light. Chatter glided over the polished floors like champagne bubbles. Laughter at the edge of rooms she hadn't reached yet. Eyes that flicked to her, then away, the kind that saw her color before her credentials. A woman in pearls whispered something into her husband's ear. He gave that familiar nod, not a greeting, a scan. Zora had been the only black woman in many rooms before, but this felt different. Not overt, not loud, just designed. Zora Whitfield. His voice was syrupy, practiced. Edgar Whitmore appeared from behind a gilded archway, arms open like a stage actor at curtain rise. Welcome to Greystone. She extended her hand. Mr. Whitmore. Please, Edgar. You're family now, aren't you? He smiled like a man trying to swallow the future but not choke on it. From the stairs, Evelyn Whitmore descended like a first lady. Every strand of her silver blonde hair locked in place. Her eyes scanned Zora with a kind of pleasant restraint, the kind that's taught in finishing schools and boardrooms where power wears pearls. We've placed you in the East Wing, Evelyn said sweetly. Zora paused. I was told the other guests are in the West. Yes, Evelyn smiled, lips like porcelain, but we thought you'd appreciate the privacy. Zora held her gaze, unblinking. Another subtle message, beautifully wrapped and barely hiding its racist undertones. As she walked toward the staircase, she didn't look back. But in her chest, something shifted. Not doubt, not fear, just that old knowing. She'd been invited but never meant to feel at home. And if this weekend was meant to be polished, pleasant, and performative, then someone had just made a mistake. Because when you try to contain a black woman who built her empire in rooms colder than marble, you risk getting exposed. The guest suite in the East Wing was pristine, like a photograph staged for a magazine, not a place where people truly lived. Beige walls, crystal sconces, an ocean view muted behind layers of double-glazed glass. Zora stepped in and scanned the room. Not a book, not a photo, not a fingerprint of history. Just curated elegance that looked expensive but felt sterile. She placed her suitcase gently on the edge of the king-sized bed, the leather soft beneath her fingers. And for a moment, she stood still, listening. Silence. The kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful but clinical. She'd been here before. Not this exact mansion, not this exact rug or art collection, but in spaces designed to host everyone, without truly embracing anyone who looked like her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lena, her CFO, still in Sierra Valley. "You good, gut check?" Zora stared at the screen, then typed, "Quiet, but the walls are saying plenty." She didn't need a mirror to feel the weight of what wasn't being said. Every gesture so far had come with lace, but inside the lace was wire. A knock interrupted her thoughts. A young white man in a suit too tight at the shoulders stood at the door. He didn't meet her eyes when he spoke. "Ms. Whitfield, dinner will be at 7. Formal. There's a stylist available for, touch-ups." His voice faltered on the last word. "Touch-ups." She tilted her head, catching the microtone of discomfort he tried to swallow. Touch-ups for what? Her natural curls, her skin, her presence. Zora smiled small, deliberate. "I came prepared." He flushed. "Of course, ma'am," then vanished. She turned toward the floor-length mirror, smoothed the lapel of her blazer, checked her watch. Not because she doubted her look, but because the world had taught her black women in power aren't allowed to make mistakes even in silence. Especially not in rooms this white. This wasn't about style. This was about standing in a house that didn't want her to forget that while her net worth earned the invitation, her skin still made them second-guess the welcome. It wasn't just class. It was coded, racist, quiet, and elegant, but still racist. And as Zora adjusted the single gold ring on her finger, a gift from her aunt long gone, she whispered, barely audible, "Let's see who really gets exposed." The dining hall was a cathedral of power, all 12-foot ceilings, flickering candelabras, and mahogany polished to the point of vanity. Zora entered exactly at 6:59. She never arrived early, and she never arrived late. The conversations lowered just a decibel, enough to notice, not an insult, but a signal. The black woman had entered. Edgar Whitmore stood at the head of the table, swirling a glass of scotch like it contained not just liquor, but legacy. "Ah, our guest of honor," he called out, arms open again. There was a faint patter of polite applause, the kind reserved for charity events and tolerable guests. No standing ovation, no warmth, just acknowledgement. Evelyn Whitmore appeared beside her like a vision in ivory silk. "Come, dear, let's find you a seat." But Zora noticed the direction they moved, not toward the head, not near Edgar or the board members, but further down, past the lineage of old suits and stilettoed daughters-in-law, a seat exactly halfway down the table. Not humiliating, just surgical. She sat quietly, folding one napkin over her lap, her face unreadable, her fingers precise. Across from her, a man in a velvet dinner jacket leaned forward. "So you're the tech genius everyone's whispering about." He smiled, teeth perfect and voice too loud. Zora gave him the kind of smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. "I'm Zora Whitfield, CEO of EtherCore." Right. He nodded. "AI something data magic." She responded calmly. "We design autonomous cognitive systems for defense, healthcare, and predictive risk infrastructure." He blinked. "Ah, I just assumed you were in media. You've got that presence." Presence? The word dripped with intention, a compliment sewn from polyester threads. Zora didn't blink. Presence comes standard when you're not expected to exist in the room at all. The woman next to him laughed lightly, then sipped her wine. Zora had seen this dance before, the racist discomfort cloaked in fascination, the nods, the tepid jokes, the question marks disguised as curiosity. Further up the table, glasses clinked. Edgar was already holding court, regaling hedge fund partners with stories of jet-fueled summers and oil-funded empires. But none of it mattered. Not the chandelier above. Not the sea below. Not the legacy whispers in between. Because something had already shifted. They hadn't invited her to lead. They'd invited her to decorate. And if they couldn't see the value of a black woman seated at the table, they were about to feel the power of her standing up. Dinner was served in silver courses, each plate a sculpture, each garnish a flex. The kind of meal meant more for photography than nourishment. Zora's fork moved with mechanical grace. She chewed like she was taught slow, quiet, unshakable. The man to her left swirled his Bordeaux and leaned in. "So, Zora," he said, tongue curling over the Z like he wasn't used to saying names like hers. "Where did you go to school again?" "MIT for undergrad," she answered, without looking up, "and postgrad at Stanford." A pause. Then the woman beside him gave a crisp laugh, like glass breaking. "Well then," she said, eyebrows raised. "Look at you. That's impressive." She didn't say for someone like you. She didn't have to. Across the table, someone muttered the word diversity. Zora couldn't tell if it was a joke or a statement, but either way, it landed like a rock in a glass bowl. She breathed once deep and through her nose. A waiter, Latino and maybe 19, came to refill her water. He didn't speak. His eyes met hers briefly, and in them, she saw it. Recognition. Not of fame. Of familiarity. The silent nod shared by people who know what it's like to serve in rooms that were never built for you. She nodded back, subtle, almost invisible. Further down the table, Edgar launched into a story about the 80s and deregulation. The words power play and boys club drifted through the air like secondhand smoke. And through it all, Zora remained composed. Because this wasn't new. This was practiced racism, elegant, layered, socially acceptable. The kind that came wrapped in "I'm just saying," and don't take it the wrong way. But underneath it was the same old fear of brilliance in black skin. She glanced at her untouched wine. They were watching her not just for manners, but for cracks, a flinch, a wince, a moment of fire. But Zora had learned something long ago. Don't fight where they can film the flame. Fight where silence burns deeper. And as laughter rose again from the front of the table, she let her silence sharpen like the edge of a blade still hidden in its sheath. Because not all revolutions are loud, and not all truths need to shout to be exposed. Dessert had not yet arrived, but the discomfort already had. A hush fell over Zora's section of the table, not complete silence. Just that brittle kind where everyone waits for someone else to speak first. Then Logan Whitmore strolled over, unbuttoned shirt collar, scotch in hand, the sun, the air, the signal of what this dynasty considered its future. He slid into the empty chair beside her without asking. "Zora, right." His tone was warm, performative. "I've heard all about you. Big mind, big moves, big valuation." He grinned, teeth gleaming, words too loud. She replied, still composed, "I suppose you've done your homework." "More like everyone's been buzzing," he said. Dad's impressed, but he paused, swirling his drink. "There's still concern," he said softly, "about temperament." Zora tilted her head. "Temperament. You know," he went on, whispering now. "Founders like you. Passionate. Driven. But passion can tip into volatility. And, well, $500 million's a big handshake. Needs steadiness." Zora stared at him. Then asked, low and clear, "If I were a 46-year-old white man in all birds and Patagonia fleece, would you still be worried about my temperament?" He laughed. Awkward. "Come on. Don't do that. I'm just saying what the board might be thinking." "I know exactly what you're saying," she said. And then she stood. No apology, no warning, no dramatic gesture. Just the quiet grace of someone done performing politeness. She walked away, heels clicking like punctuation on marble. Eyes followed her, but no one stopped her. Because Zora had just stepped out of the frame they'd painted for her. And in doing so, she'd exposed everything they wanted to keep polished and buried. The table kept talking. The candles kept burning. The wine kept pouring. But something had shifted, not in the room, in the balance of power. The guest bathroom near the corridor was marble and chrome, the kind of luxury that didn't invite comfort, only admiration. Zora locked the door behind her, not out of fear, out of self-preservation. She stood still for a moment. No sigh, just breath. Like her lungs were recalibrating after holding back too much grace. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Black women like her had learned early tears cost more than silence. In the mirror, her reflection was steady high cheekbones, bare lips, curls pinned in a low twist like armor. People often confused restraint with coldness. But Zora knew what they called calm in men. They called defensive in her. What they called focused in white founders. They called intense in black ones. And tonight, it wasn't the dessert or the seating chart that stung. It was the confirmation of something she had sensed the moment she stepped through those doors. This wasn't a merger, it was a test. Her phone buzzed on the sink. A text from Lena, her CFO. "How bad is it?" Zora typed. "Not violent, just decorated. But the racism is still there. It's just whispering." She stared at those words for a long moment, then deleted the last sentence and replaced it with, "I may walk." 3 dots. Then a reply. "I've got the press release draft on standby. You don't have to explain your dignity to anyone." Zora blinked once, then smiled. That's why Lena was more than a CFO. She was her mirror, her sword, her witness. There was a knock at the door. Zora. It was Evelyn Whitmore. Voice soft, friendly, practiced. Zora opened the door. Evelyn tilted her head, half sympathy, half warnings in her eyes. "Logan can be unfiltered," she said gently. "Don't take it too personally." Zora responded evenly, I'm taking it seriously." Evelyn blinked. A flicker of something recognition resentment. Before she could respond, Zora continued, her voice calm but firm. "Sometimes what you call personality, the rest of us know as pattern." The hallway was silent. And in that moment, without raising her voice, Zora had exposed more than Logan. She'd exposed the entire culture that made space for him. By morning, the estate smelled of sea air, scorched espresso, and lavender linens. Outside, the ocean glimmered with indifference. Inside, tension had taken on a new shape, less sharp, more institutional. Zora sat by the window of her guest room, hair still damp from a shower, fingers scrolling through news briefs on her tablet. The merger buzz was everywhere: tech blogs, business bulletins, even finance TikTok. Ethercore to merge with Whitmore Holdings. Historic partnership. A new chapter. She read the headlines like they belonged to someone else. She could almost hear them whispering. The black woman finally made it into the circle, but they didn't understand. She wasn't trying to be inside. She was weighing if the circle deserved her. A soft knock. It was Clark again, the assistant in navy wool and nerves. "Brunch will begin shortly. Shareholders are arriving, and Mr. Whitmore has arranged a..." She raised her hand, gentle but final. "Tell him I'll come down when I'm ready." He nodded too quickly. "Of course, Miss Whitfield." Zora turned back toward the sea. The breeze carried in a question she'd been avoiding. What would it cost to walk away from $500 million? Answer: money. But money was a renewable resource. Integrity wasn't. She thought back to the dining table, the wine, the polished insults, to Logan's words temperament, to Evelyn's half smiles, to the way everyone else had said everything without saying anything at all. That wasn't just one moment. It was a system, a language, a network designed to look welcoming, but operate with precision exclusion. She picked up her phone. Lena had already sent over a revised statement draft. "We believe in partnerships rooted in shared vision and mutual respect. Where dignity is negotiable, the deal is already broken." Zora read it twice, then added a line at the top. Internal use only pending final decision. Because this wasn't reaction, it was reconnaissance. They'd dressed the room in crystal and caviar, but what they didn't know was that Zora had come here not just to dine, but to decide who would be left standing when the truth was finally exposed. The sunroom was a glass box warmed by privilege. Pillows the color of pale peaches, rugs hand-woven from Moroccan wool, and a breakfast spread that looked more like a silent auction than a meal. Edgar Whitmore stood near a pitcher of cucumber water, his posture casual, his eyes sharp. "Zora," he said as she entered, "you missed the early crowd. We had a senator drop by." She offered a polite nod. "I was attending to something more urgent, my peace of mind." He chuckled, like a man who thought women were charming when they were clever, but dangerous when they were too calm. "You know," he said, pouring her a glass she didn't ask for, "you've stirred the room more than I expected. That's not a criticism." "No," she asked, taking the glass but not drinking. He leaned in just slightly. "Some of our guests, older, traditional, weren't quite prepared for someone like you." She met his eyes. "By someone like me, you mean black, unapologetic, female, or just someone you didn't handpick?" He didn't flinch. But the pause that followed stretched like the ocean beyond the glass walls, wide, unsettled. "We're making history here, Zora," he said at last, "and history isn't always comfortable." She placed the glass down, untouched. "History is only uncomfortable," she said, "when it's told truthfully." He smiled again, this time tighter. "I admire your clarity, but I hope you're not mistaking formality for rejection." She tilted her head, like considering a move on a chessboard. "Let's not confuse civility with equity. You can smile at me and still systemically place me 3 seats away from decision-making." His face froze for just a breath, a microsecond crack in the Empire facade. And in that moment, Zora knew she had found the lever. The tone, the structure, the mask, exposed. She stood slowly. "I'll see you at the shareholder brunch," she said. And before he could respond, she was already walking away, heels soft on silk rug, but each step a statement. Zora sat at the edge of the guest room bed, barefoot, phone glowing in her hand like a quiet ally in enemy territory. Outside, voices drifted from the courtyard, laughter, champagne flutes clinking, the soft murmur of deals being imagined over pastries and ego. She had a message half-drafted on screen, a reply to Lena. "I need clean phrasing, no drama, but sharp enough they feel it." Lena replied instantly. "Got it, here's a working line." A new draft slid into view. "After careful reflection, Ethercore will not be moving forward with the proposed merger. We believe power must be shared, not staged." Zora read it again. Then again. It was nearly right, but it needed to cut deeper, not in tone, but in truth. She placed the phone down and stood. Across the room, a leather portfolio lay open, notes from previous negotiations neatly tucked into folders, agreements, numbers, projections. And under it all, a hand-sketched roadmap of what Ethercore was building next. Not for acquisition, not for approval, but for autonomy. She slid the folder shut. Not out of anger, out of alignment. It was never about making a statement. It was about staying whole. She walked to the closet, unzipped her travel garment bag, and laid out a clean, understated suit, charcoal gray, cream blouse, no jewelry, nothing to perform, only to mean what she meant. A knock. She opened the door. It was a house staff member, black, middle-aged, eyes tired but curious. "Ms. Whitfield, the Whitmores asked if you'll be attending the press moment after brunch." Zora gave a quiet smile. "Not this time." The woman nodded, almost relieved, as if she too understood what it feels like to be expected to smile through rooms that tried to shrink you. As the door closed, Zora whispered to herself, more prayer than declaration. "They wanted me quiet. They'll remember me silent." The brunch spread was a performance soft jazz, fresh-cut lilies, linen pressed so crisp it dared you to spill. Zora arrived not through the main hall but through the garden-side entrance, her heels soundless on the stone path. No entourage, no announcement, just her. Inside, Edgar stood flanked by shareholders. He held a mimosa like a gavel, dispensing charm in calculated doses. Zora watched him from across the room. Evelyn spotted her first, a flash of tight-lipped surprise, quickly masked by a politician's smile. "Zora, darling," she said, moving in. "You look lovely." "Thank you," Zora replied, her voice calm, clipped, not cold-controlled. "We were just about to begin the remarks," Evelyn said. "Will you be joining Edgar at the front?" Zora glanced toward the podium, cameras, flashbulbs, a branded backdrop that read, "Legacy meets innovation." She smiled, but it didn't warm. "I think I'll observe from here." Evelyn hesitated, then nodded, her grip on the situation loosening like a silk ribbon slipping from a gift box. That's when Logan Whitmore emerged, sunglasses still on, despite the indoor lighting. He clinked his glass with the edge of a silver tray, grinning too wide. To Zora he called, voice already loud. A few guests looked over, unsure if it was a toast or a test. "She's not just brilliant," Logan went on. "She's brave. Walking into this house, into this legacy. It's almost like watching history get rewritten." He laughed. No one joined. Zora didn't move. Logan stepped closer, emboldened. "Honestly, I told my father, this is the boldest diversity play he's ever made." The room tensed. And Zora? She simply tilted her head. Not shocked. Not even surprised. "Just done." "You don't have to clap," she said softly, eyes locked on him. "But you'll remember this moment not because I smiled through your insult, but because one day, you'll realize you were the one being exposed. Not me." The room froze. Even the jazz stopped. And in that silence, Zora Whitfield turned away, not in retreat, but in full possession of everything they tried to make her question. Zora closed the heavy door to her guest room and leaned her back against it. Not for support, for pause. She had felt it that exact moment when the room had cracked, not from her voice, from their exposure. Logan's words had done more damage to the Whitmore's legacy than any headline ever could, and all she'd done was speak with precision, not fury. She crossed the room in 3 quiet steps, sat at the desk, and opened her laptop. Ethercore's logo blinked on screen, bold, clean, hers. The cursor pulsed like a heartbeat waiting for instruction. Her inbox had new messages, a journalist asking for early comment, 2 board members forwarding article drafts. Lena, again short and surgical. "It's time." Zora didn't hesitate. She opened the statement draft and rewrote the opening line. "Ethercore is committed to partnerships rooted in shared values. When those values are compromised, we act with clarity." She kept typing, fingers steady. "After internal review and ethical assessment, we are withdrawing from the proposed merger with Whitmore Holdings. This decision reflects our belief that culture cannot be bought, and dignity cannot be bargained." She paused, then added one final sentence, not for drama, but for record. "We do not exist to decorate legacies. We build our own." She saved the draft, then sent it to Lena. No subject line, no explanation needed. Because Lena would understand this wasn't a reaction, it was reclamation. From the hallway, she heard footsteps, hushed voices, someone knocking on a door that wasn't hers. The house, the system was beginning to shift, to scramble. But Zora remained still. She didn't pack. She didn't pace. She just breathed like a woman who had just refused to sell her name to a dynasty that never saw her as equal. And for the first time that weekend, she allowed herself the quiet luxury they never expected her to claim. Peace. The library was dim and hushed, mahogany shelves, antique globes, the scent of old money and lemon oil. Zora stood near the fireplace, the statement already sent. Edgar and Victoria entered together, their smiles no longer effortless. "Zora," Edgar began, voice coated in patience. "We heard you had concerns." Zora didn't move, didn't blink. just offered the same tone she'd used in every investor meeting that mattered. "I've decided to withdraw from the merger." Silence. Victoria stepped forward. "If this is about Logan—" "It's not just about Logan," Zora said, cutting her off, not harsh, just final. "It's about tone, about posture, about the way you treat leadership you don't recognize." Edgar's jaw tensed. "Do you realize what you're walking away from?" Zora stepped toward the center of the room, voice low but firm. "Yes, I'm walking away from your capital, your name, your headlines." She paused. "But I'm also walking away from being used to modernize your image, while you protect a structure that was never meant to hold people like me except as symbols." Victoria folded her arms. "Zora, this deal was good for both of us." "No," Zora said. "It was good for your PR, not for my company, and certainly not for my conscience." Edgar tried one last time, tone sharpening. "If this becomes public—" "It already is," she said calmly. His face dropped half a shade. She continued. "This house, this family, this legacy. You invited me here not as a partner but as a proof point." Zora turned toward the door. And with one final look back, she added, "You didn't offend me. You exposed yourselves. All I did was believe you." Then she left. No slammed doors, no raised voice. Only the soft click of her heels, the same sound they'd ignored when she walked in. But this time, it was the sound of a woman removing her value from a room that had underestimated its cost. By the time the sun reached its arc above Greystone Shores, Zora Whitfield was already gone. No security detail, no press trail, just a silent car, a sunrise, and a woman who had chosen self-worth over spectacle. Back inside the Whitmore estate, the air felt heavier. Staff whispered in corners, guests checked phones mid-bite. And in one quiet library where antique books lined the walls like fragile pride, Edgar stood staring at a single sentence on his iPad screen. "EtherCore has withdrawn from the proposed merger with Whitmore Holdings. We believe dignity is non-negotiable." He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just blinked once. Meanwhile, the world had already started talking. The press release hit inboxes at 9:12 a.m. By 9:47, the first tweet went viral. "Black woman CEO walks away from $500 million deal over principles. Queen behavior." By 10:30, business anchors were dissecting the language live on air. Is this a bold ethical stand or a missed opportunity? And by noon, the hashtags were trending. Dignity first. Zora Whitfield. Exposed elegance. Even those who had never heard of EtherCore before that morning now knew two things. The Whitmore family had made a mistake. Zora Whitfield had not. At the EtherCore HQ in Sierra Valley, the atmosphere was electric. Screens in the strategy room showed clips from news outlets, threads analyzing her leadership style, and comments pouring in from startup founders, journalists, and black women across the country. She didn't flinch. She didn't fight. She just walked and the whole room tilted. Zora wasn't watching any of it. She sat in a quiet airport lounge, black coffee cooling beside her. Lena had just landed, sliding into the seat across. "No regrets," Lena asked. Zora looked out the window, then back. "Regret," she said, "is for the ones who stay silent and call it strategy." Then she sipped her coffee, slow. The taste wasn't sweet, but it was real. The story was spreading faster than any press release could have managed. It wasn't just the $500 million deal that caught attention. It was the reason it unraveled. And the way Zora walked away. No drama, no press conference, just one sentence with the weight of 1,000 silences behind it. "We do not exist to decorate legacies. We build our own." By afternoon, business influencers were quoting her like scripture. By evening, she was the top trend across 3 platforms, not for being controversial, but for being uncompromising. And the racial undertones, they weren't buried. Multiple outlets had already picked up the nuances, strategic exclusion in elite spaces, the polished face of modern racism, the black founder who exposed a culture of civility without equity. One think piece went viral under the headline, "The Price of Politeness: Why Zora Whitfield's Exit Matters." And deep in the comment sections, something rare happened: agreement. Startups run by black and brown founders began sharing quiet echoes of their own. Same smile, same tone, same table, different day. They let us in, but not up. She said what we've been swallowing for years. Even those who didn't look like her white allies, LGBTQ+ execs, first-gen immigrants, started chiming in. This wasn't a meltdown. It was a blueprint. At EtherCore, Lena was fielding calls from journalists, equity partners, even diversity fund coalitions from Europe and South Korea. One message in particular stopped her cold. A well-known venture capitalist notoriously gatekeeping had just written, "I underestimated her. I won't again." Lena forwarded it to Zora. No subject line. Zora read it once, then deleted it. She didn't need validation. She had proof. And in the spaces where she'd once been asked to sit quietly and smile, her silence now echoed louder than any applause they'd ever offered. EtherCore's inbox was no longer just full, it was on fire. Investment firms, media outlets, policy institutes, even a foundation linked to a former president had sent a curious inquiry. Some offered interviews, some offered capital. Most offered apologies dressed up as interest. Lena sat across from Zora in the strategy suite, a glass box overlooking the fog-draped hills of Sierra Valley. Between them, 5 new proposals, one signed NDA, and a handwritten note from a well-known Silicon Valley legend. Zora read it in silence. "You were right to walk away, but don't walk too far. We'd still like to build something with you." She folded the note without expression, then looked at Lena. "How many of these are offering equity on our terms?" Lena checked 2, maybe 2.5. "And the rest? Trying to clean their image with your backbone." Zora almost smiled. "Let's not let them borrow our dignity to repaint their brands." Lena raised an eyebrow. "So we pass." Zora nodded, then paused, looked out the window. "It's funny," she said. "They watched me walk out of that estate and thought I was burning a bridge. But what they don't know," she turned back to Lena, "is that I was building a road." That afternoon, EtherCore issued a quiet memo to its core staff. "We are not entertaining short-term PR partnerships. We are building long-term, value-aligned futures. We won't scale under the shadow of institutions that once asked us to shrink to fit. Let's move deliberately and unapologetically." The memo wasn't leaked. It didn't need to be. Because every action Zora took after that weekend became the loudest kind of leadership, the kind that didn't have to explain itself. And in a world trained to silence black women with glitter and courtesy, she had just done something far more disruptive than protest. She declined with clarity, and the very rooms that once overlooked her, now they couldn't stop watching. The first Monday after the fallout arrived like a quiet drum roll. There were no fireworks, no official statement from the Whitmores, no public apology. Just silence. The kind that tries to outlast accountability. But Zora wasn't waiting. At EtherCore headquarters, she stood at the front of the leadership room. No podium, no teleprompter, just a circle of chairs, notebooks, and people who looked more like the future than any merger could have promised. "Let's talk risk," she began. "Not financial, not reputational, cultural." She walked slowly around the room, her voice even. "We just said no to the kind of check people build whole careers around." A beat. "And we're still here." Some nodded, some smiled, small but real. "Because what we're building," she continued, "can't be validated by names that didn't make space for us before we became headlines." She stopped beside a whiteboard, picked up a marker. "What are we risking if we partner with someone just because they're impressed by us now?" One hand went up. Repetition. Zora nodded. "Explain." "They'll smile in our face, fund the innovation, then quietly redirect the narrative until what we built no longer reflects us." Zora clicked the cap back on the marker. "Exactly. We weren't exposed last weekend. They were." There was a long pause. Then she added, "And our job isn't to respond with fire. It's to respond with structure." After the meeting, Someone asked her if she felt proud. She considered that. No, she said, not yet. Why not? Zora glanced at the hallway wall, a collage of team photos, late-night brainstorms, sticky notes turned into patents. Because pride is what they feel when they're admired. But I don't need admiration. I need alignment. She turned back. And I need our work to speak in rooms where my face is still questioned before my title is read. The email subject line read, Visionary Collaboration Opportunity. Zora opened it over tea, still in her cotton robe, morning sun sliding across the floor. It came from Stratmore Institute, a global tech foundation known for its fellowships, white papers, and glossy magazine spreads of thought leaders. The message was glowing, too glowing. We believe your story is the embodiment of resilience and forward-thinking leadership. We'd like to invite you as the keynote speaker at our annual Power and Innovation Gala, Theme Breaking Barriers. She skimmed, then paused. At the bottom, one line in bold. Please note while we are highlighting your narrative and journey, we ask that all content be pre-approved to align with Stratmore's core values and tone guidelines. Zora didn't delete it. She let it sit like a room that smells expensive but feels hollow. Later that day, she brought it up with Lena. Let me guess, Lena said. They want to put you on the stage, but not in the meeting. Zora chuckled, bitter and knowing. Exactly. They want to photograph the crown, but never acknowledge the labor that forged it. Lena frowned. It's always the same story, different lighting. Zora stared out the window. Sometimes racism doesn't wear pearls or raise its voice. Sometimes it smiles and hands you a plaque. They both went quiet. Then Lena asked, You gonna say no? Zora shook her head. I'm going to say nothing. Lena raised a brow. Zora sipped her tea. Let them publish their issue without me. Let the absence speak louder than the feature. That afternoon, she drafted a short response. Thank you for the invitation. At this time, I'll pass. Power isn't built through spotlight. It's built through substance. ZWW. She hit send. No explanation, no post on LinkedIn, no cryptic tweets. Just one more stage walked away from before it could flatten her into symbolism. The strategy deck was already 36 slides deep when Zora clicked to the final one. Ethercore's entire leadership team sat in silence, not out of confusion, but out of awe. The slide was simple. Build it how it should have always been. No chart, no graph, just one sentence. Zora stepped away from the screen and faced the room. We've spent 5 years proving we belong. Now it's time to stop proving and start designing. Someone in the back whispered, Yes. She continued. We don't take funding that demands silence. We don't partner with brands who want to wear our story like an accessory. A few heads nodded. Lena folded her arms, smiling at nothing in particular. And we don't allow any structure, internal or external, to reward whiteness with comfort and punish black excellence with scrutiny. There it was. The word in the room said plainly, not performatively black. And said not in opposition but in foundation. Zora walked to the edge of the table. I want Ethercore to be more than resilient. I want us to be precise, intentional. I want our recruiting to reflect our values, our language to reflect our roots, our exits to be clean, our entries to be bold. A woman from product raised her hand. Are we ready to scale under this model? Zora didn't hesitate. No, not yet. But if we wait for perfect conditions, we'll inherit the same broken systems wearing new logos. She paused. Let's build before they figure out how to mimic our vision and sell it back to us without credit. The room stilled. Then someone clapped. Then another. Until the whole room was standing not for performance, but because they knew this wasn't business as usual. This was the blueprint they'd been waiting to be invited into, and now they were co-architects. Somewhere in a corner office across the city, a white man would read this on TechCrunch tomorrow and feel exposed. But Zora wouldn't need to say a word. The structure would speak for her. Zora didn't expect to see Logan Whitmore again. Certainly not in the quiet lobby of a downtown co-working space, 3 weeks after the deal had crumbled like sugar glass. But there he was, collar buttoned this time, hair combed back like respectability was a costume he still hadn't grown into. She spotted him before he spotted her. He stood near the front desk, nervously checking his phone, then the time, then his reflection in the glass. Not the posture of power, the posture of pursuit. Lena glanced at Zora. Want me to send him away? Zora shook her head once. No, let's hear what Legacy wants today. They stepped into a neutral conference room. No branding, no camera, just light, walls, and truth. Logan stood as they entered. Zora, he said, with a tension in his jaw that tasted like regret but not apology. I won't take much of your time. Zora nodded but said nothing. He continued. I just wanted to say, I underestimated what you were doing. And I think there's room for alignment now, if you're open to it. Zora tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Alignment, she repeated. Yes, we've reevaluated some internal things. Our board's reshuffling. There's appetite for evolution. Lena smirked quietly. Zora didn't blink. So you came here to sell me the cleaned-up version of what I already walked away from? No, Logan said. We came to ask if you'd reconsider, with more control, your terms. Zora stared at him for a long moment. Then she asked, flatly, Do you remember what you said to me at that table? Logan swallowed. I remember. Do you remember why it mattered? He hesitated, and in that hesitation, the room quietly exposed him again. Zora stood, slow but certain. I don't need revenge, Logan, but I also don't recycle my boundaries. She turned to leave. Wait, he said, you don't want to hear the terms. She looked over her shoulder. I already did, 3 weeks ago, with your tone. And then she left, not for drama, not for headlines, but because some doors are best remembered closed. It started with a message in Zora's inbox. Subject coffee. The sender was Tanya Olumide, founder of a promising biotech startup in Atlanta. Black woman. First gen. MIT. Just like Zora. Zora remembered her from a panel years ago. Sharp mind. Quiet presence. Always calculated. Never loud. The kind of woman white venture capitalists praised on stage but ignored in strategy. Zora replied. Coffee's too small. Come to Sierra Valley. Bring your pitch and your full self. 3 days later, Tanya arrived carrying a slide deck and a decade of being overlooked. They sat across from each other in Ethercore's garden courtyard, no agenda, just sunlight and steel chairs. I'm tired, Tanya admitted, after 2 sips of jasmine tea, of pretending I don't notice when they change tone once I walk in, of adjusting my voice so it doesn't sound too certain, of being included, but not invested in. Zora didn't interrupt. She let the words breathe. Then she said, I know. They let us in, as long as we don't rearrange the furniture. Tanya laughed quietly. But the minute we question the layout, she added. They say we're difficult, Zora finished. A silence fell, not heavy, just honest. Then Zora leaned forward. You're not too much, you're too aware. And that's dangerous to people who mistake structure for safety. Tanya blinked. Once? Then why did you walk away, really? Zora exhaled. Because I realized I wasn't being offered a partnership. I was being invited to validate their optics, to be present, but not in power. Tanya sat back. That explains it. Explains what? Why your story spread like wildfire. You didn't just say no. You said it for all of us who've swallowed yes for years. Zora didn't smile. She just reached into her bag and slid across a folder. Tanya opened it. Partnership agreement, equity fair, governance shared. Tanya looked up, stunned. You're funding me. Zora shook her head. No, I'm building with you. Let's make something they can't explain away or edit out. The envelope came with no return address. Just her name, handwritten in dark ink, Zora Whitfield. Inside, a folded letter and a photo. Zora sat at her desk, dusk softening the edges of her office. She unfolded the letter. Ms. Whitfield, you don't know me, But I know what you did. I watched the video. Not the press one, the one someone recorded at that brunch. The moment you told them silence doesn't mean surrender. I've replayed that clip 23 times. I'm 17. I want to be an engineer. But last year, I almost switched majors. Not because I couldn't keep up, but because I was tired of being watched like I didn't belong in every room. Then I saw you walk out without slamming the door. And something shifted. So I stayed. This photo was taken last week. My first hackathon. Our team won second place. I just wanted to say you didn't just protect your company. You protected the idea of me. Thank you. Kamira J. Zora stared at the photo. A young black girl in a navy hoodie, eyes bright with fire, holding a plastic trophy, beaming, the caption scrawled in ballpoint under the picture. She built it for us. Zora leaned back in her chair, eyes wet but unshed. It wasn't about pride. It wasn't about victory. It was about knowing that somewhere, a girl chose to stay loud because a woman once chose to walk away in silence. Lena knocked lightly at the door. You okay? Zora nodded, folded the photo, slipped it into the corner of her notebook like scripture. Yeah, she said, I think we just got our mission statement. Lena tilted her head. What's that? Zora looked up, steady. We don't build for validation. We build so they don't have to shrink to survive. Outside, the city began to glow, and Zora, for the first time in a long time, let herself be still. The panel invitation came from a prestigious conference in Zurich. Title: The Future of Founders Breaking the Cycle. Zora declined without hesitation. She didn't need to be flown first class to speak on a stage designed to mention race without ever saying black. She had no interest in sitting on a diversity panel while the real deals happened behind closed doors. Instead, she spent that weekend in a library in Oakland surrounded by high schoolers in oversized sweatshirts, clicking keyboards, scribbling startup ideas on whiteboards that barely held ink. A volunteer named Jules, a 19-year-old with locks and a dry sense of humor, asked her, You're Zora Whitfield, right? Zora smiled. Depends who's asking. You walked away from $500 million to stay black in public. That's cold. Zora laughed, full and soft. It wasn't cold, she said. It was warm. It's just that warmth makes people uncomfortable when they've built their house out of glass. Jules nodded, like he'd just learned a new verb. He pointed at a messy table in the corner. You should meet my team. We're building something. It's glitchy, but it's ours. Zora walked over. 5 teenagers, 3 laptops, 1 broken HDMI cable, no business cards. It was chaotic, honest, alive. And when she sat with them cross-legged, blazer off, curls free, they didn't ask for her resume. They asked if she knew how to fix a bug in the loop function. She did. That night, no cameras rolled. No press showed up. No billionaire son dropped a careless joke over champagne. Just Zora, at a folding table, rewriting legacy with every keystroke, and every kid who learned that leadership doesn't always come wearing a name tag. Sometimes it walks in wearing sneakers, sits down, and listens first. In a world obsessed with spotlight, she'd chosen something rarer. Depth, continuity, and a room where no one had to prove they belonged because they already did. It was late when Zora returned home, too late for dinner, too early for sleep. She stood in the center of her apartment, where the floor-to-ceiling windows held the city like a quiet storm. No shoes, no earrings, no armor. Just her. She poured a glass of water, didn't drink it, just held it the way you hold a thought too heavy to speak out loud. Then she walked to the mirror by the hallway, the one that had seen her at 3 a.m. with code in her hair, and again at 7 a.m. before boardrooms that never looked back at her as an equal. She looked herself in the eye and whispered, barely above a breath, You didn't fold, you didn't beg, and you're still here. There had been days she almost shaved her head just to stop being too textured for tech. Nights she practiced how to say assertive in a softer voice. Mornings when she asked herself if being visible was worth always being misunderstood. But now she wasn't just present, she was whole. Not because the world had accepted her, but because she had stopped waiting for it to. She reached into the drawer below the mirror, pulled out an old photo. Age 22. Blazer 2 sizes too big. Smile too wide. Eyes still asking for permission. Zora held it like a relic. Then softly, "You were never too loud. They just couldn't hold the sound of your becoming." She placed the photo on her desk not to hide it, but to witness it. Because every boardroom that tried to edit her down, every handshake that came with a warning, every deal that mistook her presence for performance, none of them had the final word. She did. And it was not an apology. It was a reminder. You don't owe anyone your silence just because they mistake your stillness for submission. The city outside blinked, and Zora stood still. Still, but never quiet. 2 months later, an article went live. Headline: "The woman who declined $500 million and rebuilt the Standard instead." Zora didn't read it. Lena forwarded it with a comment. "You're trending again. They called you the most quietly disruptive force in tech." Zora smiled, not flattered, not moved, just aware. She'd been called many things: difficult, emotional, too principled, too quiet, too black for acquisition, not black enough for charity. Now they were saying disruptive. But what Zora did wasn't disruption, it was realignment. She didn't come to shake the table. She came to build one that couldn't be flipped when a black woman sat at the head. That week, her calendar stayed full. Not with press. With build sessions, new founders, black scientists, disabled coders, queer product designers, mothers, dreamers, people who weren't trying to prove they belonged, just people finally allowed to belong without asking. One afternoon, a young intern asked her, "Ms. Whitfield, what do you call what you're doing?" Zora paused, then answered, gently, "I call it returning the room to those who were never meant to leave it in the first place." The intern blinked, smiled, wrote it down like scripture. That night, Zora walked alone on a quiet street. No interviews, no headlines. Just wind, just rhythm, just breath. She passed a cafe, saw a black girl at the window, head buried in a laptop, earbuds in, hoodie up. Zora didn't knock, didn't interrupt. She just kept walking, knowing the girl would finish what she came to do. Because when a story ends right, you don't need applause. You need echo. And some stories, the best ones, they don't end. They stay with you, like a hush that holds weight, like silence that doesn't mean defeat, like legacy rewritten not with volume, but with refusal. Refusal to shrink, refusal to sell, refusal to be edited. And in that refusal, Zora exposed them all without ever needing to raise her voice. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.